Hello everyone, my name is JonSchultz and this is my presentation on educational laws in Korea. So to start, a bit of a forward here. I am Canadian, but I'm living and working in Korea, so I've decided to tackle Korean educational law at the elementary level, which is what I teach. This is a bit difficult because I do not speak much Korean, but this is more relevant to me as a teacher, so I've done what research I can. As far as I can tell, there are only two general laws which encompass most of the regulations of the educational system at the elementary level in Korea. Now, there's a number of subcategories related to these laws, but the names of such or the specific clauses within, I'm unable to find. So, in my own attempt to meet the criteria of this assignment, which I understand is to talk about 3 or 4 laws, I'm going to introduce these 2 laws and try and give a little bit more detail by giving examples of their impact on 4 different areas of English-based education in Korea without delving too much into the specifics. So there will be 3 parts to this presentation. First, I will discuss the governing bodies which enact and oversee educational law in Korea. Next, I will introduce the 2 fundamental laws which affect education at the primary level in Korea. And last, I'll give examples of how they can affect the day-to-day function of elementary level institutions. The Korean Constitution serves as a basis from which all educational laws and regulations are derived. It also lays the foundation for the objectives of the Korean education system. This system includes a curriculum which seeks to educate people in the areas of individuality, creativity, exploration, culture, and community. Now, along with these goals, there are some other differences between Korean education as compared to American education or Canadian education. Students are also educated in other subjects such as society and manners and general etiquette. Korean educational administration can be broken down into 3 levels. At the national level, there's the Ministry of Education. At the provincial and municipal level, there are offices of education. And lastly, at the county or in Korean gu level, there are local offices of education. Any revisions, amendments, and enforcement of these laws fall under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Education, with certain freedoms given to these offices of education in each area. In Seoul, where I live, we are presided over by the Seoul Ministry of Education, known as SMOE, and the Seoul Board of Education. Prior to 1997, all law pertaining to education in Korea fell under the umbrella of one single law called the Education Law, which was enacted in 1949. In 1997, this was determined to be a little bit archaic, so they split this up into different laws which pertain to different areas and levels of education, such as kindergarten, elementary, middle, and secondary, tertiary education, vocational, and other forms of education. The 2 main laws governing education at the primary level in Korea are the Fundamental Law of Education and the Elementary and Secondary Education Law. These laws have an impact on 4 separate sources of elementary level schooling in Korea, which are public schools, private schools, international and foreign schools, and private academic institutions, which are known as hagwons, and I'll discuss these a little bit in turn. First is the Fundamental Law of Education. This law defines Korea's goals and objectives for education of its citizens. This law is sort of the basis by which all the rest of the laws in Korea are founded. It lays down the framework for a system of lifelong education. It also guarantees the educational rights of Korean citizens as set out in the Constitution. Perhaps more important is the Elementary and Secondary Education Law. This encompasses all law and regulations pertaining to elementary, middle, and secondary schools in Korea. This includes specific regulations on tuition costs, evaluation of students, establishment and operations of all forms of schools, curriculum and grade systems, graduation, and learning materials such as which textbooks might be allowed to be used in different schools. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about public and private schools at the elementary level in Korea. The Elementary and Secondary Education Law states that students will attend elementary school from grades 1 through 6. The core subjects to be taught are math, English, art, Korean, physical education, and science. In addition to these subjects, other complementary subjects may be offered by each school, taught by professionals who specialize in said subjects. There are a number of ways in which public and private schools in Korea differ from their Western counterparts. One that's quite noteworthy is how it's chosen which school a child will attend. If the parents want their children to attend public school, a school is chosen randomly based on their address. So they'll be chosen to attend a school that is nearby to them, but which school they will not be able to choose. If they choose for their child to attend a private school, they must enter a lottery system to determine whether or not they will actually be allowed to attend that school, as there are usually a greater demand for those positions than there are supply. This is of particular concern to teachers who have children, who would normally want their children to attend the school at which they teach, but under these laws, were not afforded that choice. Now, much like in Western countries, for second language acquisition, English is taught by a separate instructor, often a native speaker from an English-speaking country, although this is not always the case. Specific textbooks are chosen for each grade level, and these textbooks are mandatory learning material that must be covered in that grade year. Now, as of 2013, an amendment to the Elementary and Secondary Education Law decreed that English instruction would not begin until 3rd grade. Prior to this, children were allowed to begin English instruction in the 1st grade. In the 3rd and 4th grade, English instruction is now limited to 2 hours per week. This amendment was made over concerns that children might have weakened Korean language skills as a result of learning English at such young ages. So this is basically to prevent the English language learning from interfering with the acquisition of their own language. Private schools in Korea are a bit different. They offer varying degrees of English instruction. This ranges from the basic level mandated by the Elementary and Secondary Education Law to partial immersion. Prior to the 2013 amendment, a number of private schools offered immersion starting in the 1st grade. As a result of this amendment, private schools have suffered and are forced to limit their English language instruction, and have been prohibited from using foreign English textbooks. Thus, many private English immersion schools are now engaged in illicit practices, teaching English outside of mandated hours and using the mandatory textbooks only when audited. The effect of such regulations and amendments to the Korean laws can have a drastic impact on the lives and job opportunities of teachers in the private schooling industry. Now, outside of public and private schools, there are also other categories of schools, which are international schools and foreign schools. The Elementary and Secondary Education Law includes separate ruling for these English-only schools, which are given the international or foreign school status. These two have some differences, which include limitations on what curriculum they can teach, limitations on their tuition prices that they might charge, the licensure that's required to become one of such schools, and the requirement on number of foreign nationals that are enrolled. International schools can kind of just be looked at as glorified private schools who are able to teach English 100% of the time without any limits on their nationality and which type of students attend. Foreign schools, on the other hand, are what would internationally be considered international schools. These schools, by Korean law, must have at least 70% of their student populace being foreign nationals or having at least one parent who was born in another country or holds another passport. Last, just briefly, I'd like to talk about private language institutions, or hagwons in Korea. This country is the largest after-school education industry in the world, and it's pretty famous for that. This is of increasing concern as students are facing uncomparable levels of stress and competition in order to enter many of the high schools and most prestigious universities in the country. These students study late on to the night and in the early hours of the morning, and most of them attend these hagwons. The SMOE has realized what a burden this has placed on students and families who have to incur the costs of having their students enrolled in all these academies. And they've enacted an ordinance that now private educational institutes are only allowed to operate between 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. This is just another example of how these laws affect the day-to-day lives of students and what employable opportunities teachers might have. In conclusion, as Korea continues to progress as a first world society, its government is still in the process of making many amendments to its educational laws in order to promote autonomy and reduce the reliance on private education and its financial burden on families. According to the MOE, one of its current goals is to decrease rote learning and provide a more student-centered, practice-based learning environment. It plans to do this with its STEAM initiative, which is centered around incorporating artistic teaching methods into science-based instruction. The intent of this initiative is to produce more creative contributors to the fields of technology and science. As English teachers in this foreign country, it's apparent that the MOE is shifting away from private English education, and it will be important for teachers to keep an eye on the policies and trends that it follows in the coming years.